They arrived burdened not by wealth but by memory, carrying little more than a wooden chest, a well-worn Bible, and a hunger carved from years of hardship. When German immigrants reached the wild backwoods of Wisconsin in the 1850s, they encountered a raw and unfamiliar land, towering forests, relentless winters, and miles between neighbors. But they hadn't come seeking comfort. They came fleeing hunger, political turmoil, military service, and the collapse of revolutions back home. Somehow, through smoke, salt, and simmering pots, they crafted not just food, but a foundation. They turned pork scraps and pickled roots into legacy. From fire-blackened hearths rose the smells of home: sizzling lard, fermented cabbage, thick bread tough enough to survive snowstorms. Each supper became a statement. We belong here now. Here's what's remarkable. Many of their dishes still live quietly in corners of Wisconsin kitchens today. You've probably tasted one without even knowing its roots, so stick with us. Because the 25 authentic foods you're about to rediscover aren't just meals, they're time capsules that built a homeland. One spoonful at a time. Smoked pork shoulder with sauerkraut and boiled potatoes. If any one dish could transform a log cabin in the Wisconsin wilderness into a home, it was this: smoked pork shoulder, cooked low and slow with barrels of homemade sauerkraut, and a pot of potatoes fresh from the stony soil. It wasn't just a dinner. It was an inheritance brought across the ocean, recreated inch by inch with stubborn devotion. In the 1850s, no part of that pig went to waste. Shoulders were rubbed down in coarse salt, strung up in pine smokehouses, and left to cure through harsh months. Come winter, families would lower down these preserved cuts and boil them shoulder to bone beside tangy cabbage fermented by hand. The sauerkraut wasn't there just for bite. It brightened the richness, cutting through fat and adding a zing only seasoned cooks could master. With earthy potatoes on the side, this was a survival meal, but it held so much more. Because in that comforting haze of brine and wood smoke, families found a fragment of what they'd left behind, something familiar, something they could now call their own. Bratwurst links with coarse rye bread and mustard. Long before bratwurst took its place among stadium grills and tailgate feasts, it was a humble hero of the German settler's kitchen. Out in the cold farmlands of 1850s Wisconsin, these sausage links fed families not just with calories, but with tradition. Every village butcher had their secrets: a handful of pork trimmings, maybe a touch of veal when pigs were fat, blended with pepper and nutmeg from long-past spice cabinets. Stuffed into natural casings and left to cure in drafty barns, these sausages were expressions of ingenuity. After long days in the fields or forests, families would gather around the hearth, toss those sausages into iron pans slick with lard or poured in beer, and let them sing. The snap of each browned skin released clouds of smoky comfort. Served with thick slices of rye bread fresh from home ovens and a sharp, nose-tingling mustard, these brats weren't just tasty, they were transformative. In every mouthful, there was a whisper of the old world and a celebration of a new one waking into life. Cabbage rolls filled with pork and rice in light vinegar sauce. In frontier life, cabbage was more than a crop. It was a clever, resilient ally. It withstood frost. It fed whole families when every other plant quit. And in German immigrant homes, it became the star of one of their most comforting dishes: cabbage rolls packed with pork, rice, and survival instincts. Imagine the scene in 1857. A flickering stove, a mother blanching cabbage leaves rescued from frost, laying them out carefully. Each leaf was wrapped tightly around seasoned pork and treasured rice, leftover bits that still had a role to play. The rolls were then nestled into cast iron pots, cooked slowly in a light vinegar broth. The aroma that swelled through the cabin was deeply familiar. Sour-sweet, rich, grounding. That vinegar, besides enhancing flavor, helped preserve the dish beyond mealtime. Every roll was an act of love wrapped in thrift. It took time, resourcefulness, and calm hands. And even today, when you bite into one, it's not just flavor you taste. It's the echo of resolve passed down through kitchens and centuries. Trout pan-fried in butter and herbs with steamed potatoes. Not every immigrant family had a hog in the smokehouse or beef in the barn. But Wisconsin's icy rivers sparkled with trout, free, plentiful, and ready for the skilled hands of determined settlers. At dawn, men and boys headed to the water's edge with hand-fashioned hooks made from bent nails or scrap metal. By dusk, the family cabin would glow with flickering light and the sizzle of fish frying in fresh golden butter, hand-churned and saved for meals that mattered. That butter flavored each crisped skin with gravity and care. The trout, floured, seasoned with forest-picked herbs, sometimes dill or parsley, hit the cast-iron pan and turned bronze at the edges. Served with simply steamed potatoes, the meal was a taste of the Rhine, reborn in new soil. Every bite of that buttery, flaked fish fed more than hunger, it fed the soul. Out here, far from Europe's rivers, they no longer needed to look back. They'd made their own fresh catch, their own old-world meal, and their own piece of home. Potato dumplings with mushroom gravy. To the German families of 1850s Wisconsin, the potato was more than a reliable crop. It was brown gold. Dug up from rocky land each autumn, packed in dusty cellars for months, potatoes became the beating heart of countless dishes. But one stood above the rest: Kartoffelklöße, or potato dumplings. Mothers would mash boiled potatoes, blend them with flour and eggs, and gently roll them between worn hands into pale, soft spheres. Into the pot they'd go, bubbling water catching each one and lifting it like hope. When they floated, the dumplings were ready, tender, humble, and waiting for their finishing touch. That came in the form of mushroom gravy, brown and rich, crafted from onions browned low and slow, wild mushrooms foraged in quiet forests, and maybe a splash of cream from the morning milking. Each bite was earthy, buttery, and grounding. Not fancy, not seasonal, just memory you could close your eyes and taste. And in the crunch of snow and the hush of winter, that warmth meant everything. Sauerbraten with red cabbage and spätzle. When sauerbraten hit the table, it meant something momentous had just happened. Perhaps a wedding. Perhaps the season's final harvest, or the long-anticipated return of a son who'd been lost to logging camps. This wasn't daily fare. This was ceremony. Beef was precious, and when settlers could afford to serve it, it had to be made unforgettable. In true Rhineland fashion, they marinated it for days in vinegar, onions, clove, and other hidden spices. This wasn't to be fancy, it was practical. It softened tough meat and drew out flavor in a land where tenderness came slowly. By the time it roasted in the cabin's iron pot, the aroma was thick enough to pull even neighbors from snowed-in trails. Paired with sweet red cabbage cooked until melting, and pillowy spätzle noodles cut and boiled by hand, this plate was indulgent in the best sense. Not because it was expensive, but because it said, "You've worked hard. You've survived. You've earned joy." Beer-braised pork shank with boiled carrots and parsnips. If sauerbraten was the food of praise, then beer-braised pork shank was the food of perseverance. On the frontier, where each shilling was stretched and luxury was rare, no cut of meat went uncelebrated, especially the shank. With its dense muscle and rich marrow, German settlers in Wisconsin were no strangers to beer. Some brewed their own in cool spring cellars, crafting lagers from yeast they brought overseas. When they poured it into a pot with a thick pork shank, they transformed the ordinary into something nurturing. As the stew simmered, marrow melted, vegetables softened, and steam rose like smoke signals from the fire. Carrots and parsnips soaked up the flavor like cloth, while that rich malt scent wrapped the room. When the bone finally gave in, the meat falling fork tender, families circled close. Elbows touching, bread soaking in broth, laughter finding space again, even after long labor. This wasn't a festive feast, it was something deeper, pride in the small victories. We're only halfway through these 25 incredible meals, and every single one tells a story you won't hear in any history textbook. If a dish has sparked a memory, a grandma's recipe, a Sunday meal, or even something you still cook today, share it in the comments. Your story might remind someone else of their own. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. There's a whole world of flavor, struggle, and strength still ahead. Let's keep unearthing it. Together, rye flour flatbread with lard, onions, and fresh herbs. Before they could afford soft bread loaves or dream of brick ovens, the German homesteaders on Wisconsin soil baked flatbreads that were as rugged and enduring as the land itself. This wasn't bread that rose tall. It was bread that rose fast, cooked hot, and filled bellies fast after long hours in the field. Wheat didn't thrive in this brutal, rocky soil, but rye did, thick, dark, and stubborn. Families always had a sack or two of coarse rye stored away. They'd mix flour, water, and salt by hand, then lay the dough flat across hot stones or searing cast iron. Soon it bubbled at the edges, lightly puffed, browned from smoke and flame. Then came the magic, a slick of melted lard, a scattering of chopped onions, whatever herbs they could gather from tucked-away corners of the garden. Dill, thyme, maybe parsley if it hadn't already gone to seed. This flatbread wasn't made to impress. It was made to endure. And yet, hot off the fire with the scent of onions dancing through the cabin, it delivered more than nourishment. It offered comfort. For tired hands and hungry hearts, that simple crackling crust meant everything. Split pea soup with smoked ham hock and dark bread. When icy winds rattled cabin shutters and snow piled up like barricades, steaming pots of split pea soup became lifelines on the Wisconsin frontier. It didn't matter how deep the winter bit. If you had dried peas, an onion, and a leftover ham hock, you had warmth in the making. Settlers made the most of what wouldn't spoil. Dried yellow peas, carrots, onions, and bits of smoked pork bone rescued from the last feast. The ham hock, hung long in the smokehouse, brought depth and salt to whatever it touched. And when dropped into the pot, that familiar aroma filled the cabin like a hymn. The peas softened, broke apart, thickened the broth until a spoon stood up like a flagpole. Served with dense slices of nutty rye bread, dark, chewy, and so solid it could anchor a meal, this was as much shield as supper. No one called it elegant. But after a day of splitting wood, walking through hip-deep snowdrifts, or patching holes in a drafty cabin wall, this bowl of green gold was not just hearty. It was hope made edible. Oven-baked apple strudel served with warm cream. Even in the most austere cabins, there was always space for sweetness. After days of labor and aching hands, the scent of an apple strudel baking over the hearth signaled something rare. A moment of pause, a taste of joy. The dough was stretched thin as paper, almost see-through, over an open table. It was fragile work, done slowly and with care. Inside, the settlers layered sliced apples, tart and stashed from fall, with sugar sparingly used and cinnamon kept safe in tins like treasure. Once rolled tight and baked in cast iron near the heart of the fire, something magical happened. Crisp crust, bubbling fruit, smells of orchard and old-world kitchens. This wasn't just dessert. It was celebration in a world where softness was scarce. And when poured over with warm cream, fresh from morning milk chores, each flaky, sticky bite reminded every settler that even in hard times, even in places far from home, sweetness was still possible. In that first taste, for just a second, the weight of the world disappeared. Pickled herring with onions on rye and dill garnish. Before refrigeration, before iceboxes and rail cars, German settlers stretched time with salt, vinegar, and patience. And one of their heartiest lifelines came packed in barrels, shimmering silver, pickled herring. It wasn't just a food, it was a memory. For families from the northern plains and coastal towns of the old country, herring was tradition, sustenance, nostalgia in every bite. Hauled in from distant trade routes or preserved at local outposts, salted herring made its way inland by wagon, nestled under brine. Once opened, the magic began. Fillies were soaked, then marinated in tart vinegar and softened onions, gently sweetened with just enough sugar to balance the bite. A dash of peppercorn, a few herbs. Left for days, the transformation was complete. Sharp flavors mellowed into something savory, elegant, and endlessly satisfying. Served on thick slabs of rye, topped with fresh dill, it didn't need to be hot. It needed to be strong. Like the people who made it. Even today, the sharp tang of cured fish brings not only brine, but brave memory, calling the sea home in a landlocked forest. Whole roasted goose stuffed with apples and sage. As snow blanketed Wisconsin's forests and flickering candles lit homemade garlands, one smell united immigrant cabins across miles of frost. Roasted goose. On feast days, holidays, and that sacred hush leading to Christmas, the crackling skin of a goose was more than hunger's answer. It was tradition resurrected. Settlers raised a small gaggle through warmer months, fattening each on grain and scraps, till one chosen bird was named for winter. That bird was stuffed with chopped apples, fragrant sage leaves, and hearty onions, then slowly roasted over open flames or iron ovens set deep into the hearth. The fat crisped, the apples melted, the sage perfumed the air. The moment it was pulled from heat, families went quiet, awed, reverent, grateful. Beside it, braised red cabbage, creamy potatoes, maybe a bit of sourdough torn into pieces for soaking up golden pan drippings. This was a meal that turned poverty into grace. That gathered family near. For all they'd lost in crossing shores, they had saved something vital, the joy of celebration, the rich stillness of bread-breaking moments shared under cold stars. Steamed white cabbage with bacon and caraway seeds. Cabbage isn't flashy, doesn't shimmer or melt or crunch. But in the cabins of German immigrants it was treasure, root cellar royalty. It hung on through blizzards and droughts, and with just a little bacon and wisdom, it transformed into something unforgettable. A small skillet on a small fire, bacon bits crackling in the heat. Shredded cabbage folded in slowly, wilting and shining as it absorbed the fat. You could smell the change, rawness turning rich, sharpness mellowing into perfume. Then came vinegar for balance, and just a hint of caraway, warm, nutty, grounding. Every grandparent had their own ratio, a special pan, a wooden spoon older than the kids, and every child learned to wait through the cooking, drawn in by that hushed, savory scent. Besides sausage, it completed a meal. On its own, it lingered. No one needed to say grace. This bowl said it for them. That such small scraps could carry such warmth is exactly why many called it the dish of miracles. Veal schnitzel with lemon slice and potato salad. When veal schnitzel graced a frontier table, it was never random. Something beautiful had happened. A wedding, a home built, a baby born healthy after winter. Veal was rare, and every slice was a marker of something earned. Thin cuts of meat, pounded soft with the back of a large knife, were dipped in flour, egg, then rolled in breadcrumbs made from stale rye. The pan sizzled as lard met iron, delivering crackle and scent only patience could buy. Once cooked to golden perfection, it was plated with a lemon wedge, sharp and bright, and a scoop of warm potato salad glistening in bacon drippings and light vinegar. The contrast, rich cutlet, crisp crust, soft potatoes, and sharp citrus, was life distilled into food. Celebration made chewable, and even after plates were cleared and candles burned low, the crunch in that schnitzel echoed. It reminded immigrants that grace didn't need wealth. It only asked for love, effort, and the understanding that joy, though rare, always had a seat saved at the table. Rye beer-braised sausage and sauerkraut casserole. If one dish could be called the beating heart of German Wisconsin, this was it. A bubbling pot of sausage, kraut, and rye beer that didn't just feed the body, but anchored the soul. There was nothing fancy here, just honest ingredients and the quiet confidence of those who knew how to coax greatness from the land. Every family had their own version, passed by word, not book. Fat bratwurst or tangy knackwurst, seared to a sizzle in cast iron, then layered with jars of home-fermented sauerkraut, chopped onions, and ripe slices of apple softened from storage. A pour of rye beer, dark, bitter, undeniable, brought it all together. As it cooked low and slow, the smell wrapped around the walls of the cabin. Malt, smoke, ferment, history. It was the Midwestern wilderness singing in German. By nightfall, the sausages were fork tender, and the kraut glowed golden and mellow. One pot fed everyone. One crust of bread reached through centuries. And each mouthful reminded them, culture isn't always shouted. Sometimes it's simmered. Buckwheat pancakes with jam and stewed plums. Before daylight kissed the window panes, something special began in the frontier kitchens. Batter was mixed with sleepy hands, a skillet placed on fire, and the soft scent of buckwheat rose like a promise. These weren't fluffy diner pancakes. These were heritage, nutty, thin, and meant to make something of nothing. Buckwheat grew where other crops failed, thriving in rocky earth no one else wanted. Ground into flour by hand, it became the base of simple pancakes, combined with milk, maybe a thread of molasses if the family was lucky. Dropped into hot fat, they sizzled and curled at the edges, browned to perfection. Stacked high, they were topped with summer's bounty saved in jars, sour-sweet plum preserves. Warming jam thickened over open pots. Each bite tasted like endurance, sweetened by effort. Rustic, hearty, defiant. And when the cabin filled with laughter and steam, you knew this wasn't just breakfast. This was memory, made edible. In those soft folds lay the bold truth. We're still standing. Creamed spinach and dumplings in a light onion sauce. Meat was a luxury. And sometimes, in times of faith or scarcity, the German frontier kitchens turned inward, to the woods, the rivers, the overlooked greens pushing from the banks. From that humility rose a silent triumph. Creamed spinach with soft dumplings, bathed in onion-kissed warmth. Women rose early to collect the day's ingredients, spinach pulled from damp earth, wild greens rinsed in cold creek water. Sautéed gently in butter until they surrendered their bitterness. They were then stewed in milk thickened by hand. Dumplings, nothing but eggs, flour and salt, were dropped into boiling water, softening into bites of comfort strong enough to carry sauce. This wasn't flashy. It didn't try to be, and still, when served together, it felt whole, wholesome, healing, a moment where resourcefulness met grace. A reminder that comfort doesn't demand opulence. It simply asks to be understood. Even a dish made from weeds and flour can, with care, feel like a feast. Honey-glazed ham with boiled beets and green beans. Out on the farms of Wisconsin, there came a day, usually Sunday, when even the humblest settler paused and tried to make beauty out of food. And in those sacred hours, a honey-glazed ham rising from the oven felt like proof that celebration hadn't left them entirely. Honey didn't come easy. It was traded found in wild hives or rationed carefully, so when someone stirred it with mustard or vinegar and painted a ham with the mixture, it meant this meal mattered. The ham roared in the hearth oven, fat hissing, glaze crackling, casting light and sweetness across every wall. With it came nature's garnishes, purple beets from fall's last harvest, boiled to tenderness, and vibrant green beans kissed with cream and salt. Together they balanced richness, earthiness, and brightness. A plate that echoed spring even in winter, that made neighbors linger, that hushed noisy children. On those long afternoons there were no speeches. Just chewing, smiling, silent gratitude hovering like steam above the table. Smoked fish chowder with onions and potatoes in rye broth. There were no supermarkets, no frozen fillets. The river was dinner, and if you caught something, that something had to stretch. So out of fillets smoked days before, German immigrants crafted chowders so rich, so smoky, they came to symbolize resourcefulness itself. They started with onions and potatoes, chopped fine and simmered in pots dulled from years of use. Then came an old trick, rye flour stirred into the water, thickening the broth in place of milk or cream that may have run dry. It lent a deep, earthy grain that felt ancient, complete. The smoked fish created waves of flavor, releasing memories of wood-burning stoves, cedar smoke, and silent afternoons at the lakeside. Served beside a crust of rye bread, dark and heavy. This wasn't a fisherman's boast. It was the proof of providence in action. That nothing was wasted, that scarcity sharpened skill, and that even when ingredients were humble, the end result could still taste like triumph. Lentil stew with smoked sausage and coarse ground mustard. Lentils, small, unassuming, eternal. For German settlers, they symbolized thrift at its highest form. A pot of lentils could survive the week, deepen in flavor, and feed the body without fraying the family's precious stores. But add a smoked sausage and swirl of mustard, and now you had comfort in capital letters. Into that plain pot went onions, carrots, dried lentils, washed carefully in cold well water. A leftover smoked bone or small sausage added backbone, salt, smoke, and savor. Most let it bubble all day while fires roared or fences were mended. Before serving, a dollop of coarse mustard went in, strong, tangy, reminding everyone that spice didn't always need cost. Served with thick rye and beer brewed nearby, it was food that laughed at hardship. Each bite felt like a hug wrapped in history, a secret passed down from one frugal cook to the next. Nothing wasted, everything worked for. That was the beauty of lentil stew. Humble, hearty, honest. Pumpernickel breadcrumb pudding with raisins and butter. Nothing went to waste on the frontier, including the bread. Days-old pumpernickel, dark as coffee and dense as stone, was born again as something unexpected. Dessert. And not just any dessert, but warm, rich, raisin-studded pudding that smelled like memory itself. Settlers broke crumbling loaves apart and soaked them in milk, warmed gently over fire. Eggs were folded in, a sprinkle of sugar, cinnamon, saved from better Christmases, a handful of raisins, if any remained from the dwindling barrel. It was poured into an iron dish and baked until the edges crisped and cracked, and the center sighed into softness. When served, it met drizzled butter, or better yet, fresh cream skimmed that morning. No one thought of it as a compromise. On the contrary, it was transformation. Frugality turned into luxury. A dark loaf spun into comfort, slice by slice. At the table, where candlelight flickered and fatigue melted, this pudding stood tall, sweet, savory, sacred. A dessert born of need and cherished like gold. Buttermilk rye bread soup with chopped onions and ham bits. Sometimes the soup was made not because it sounded good, but because nothing else was left. And from that kind of necessity came the genius of buttermilk rye bread soup, a dish so modest it barely spoke, but so rich in spirit that it lingered long after the bowl was empty. When yesterday's bread turned hard enough to break a tooth, families pulled it apart and softened it with warm buttermilk. The tartness gave it soul. A handful of onions, browned in fat saved from the last cut of pork, filled the air with a familiar grounding aroma, bits of ham. Just scraps, really, collected from the bone or smoked fatback, added richness and forgotten depth. As it simmered, the old bread thickened into something closer to a porridge, warm and heavy in the best way. No one pretended this was a guest meal. But when the wind howled outside and hunger asked for something that could hold its own, this dish answered. It was quiet, filling, humble, and it didn't waste a crumb. Dill-pickled cucumbers with sour cream and rye toast. When the sun hung high and the land buzzed with life, German farmers in Wisconsin reached again for generational wisdom. The pickle barrel. Cucumbers, so quick and eager to grow in the Midwest earth, were sliced and transformed each summer into bites of tangy joy meant to last through the coldest of days. In every root cellar sat jars of thin-cut cucumbers tossed with chopped dill, a splash of vinegar, a bit of sugar, and a sprinkle of salt. A perfect balance crafted by instinct. Left to mellow until sharpness softened into subtlety, the pickles held the clean brightness of the garden even months later. But on the same day they were made, when they still snapped and sang with freshness, a dollop of sour cream often accompanied them. Cool, creamy, and mellow, it turned the pickles into a dish of contrast and memory. Placed carefully over toasted rye, the result was simple but golden, sharp, smooth, crunchy, clean. On long afternoons in the fields, nothing refreshed body and spirit quite like this. It wasn't just a summer food, it was summer preserved, spoonful by spoonful. Fried perch from Wisconsin lakes with lemon butter and boiled new potatoes. The lakes weren't just pretty to look at, they were dinner. For German settlers, they were proof that the land could still offer gifts, if you knew where to listen. And when the perch were biting, no one went hungry. The fish were modest in size, but full of flavor. Caught with homemade gear and cleaned beside rippling shorelines, perch was floured lightly and fried until the edges browned and the skin crisped into perfection. Its aroma carried across the yard, calling children home faster than any shout could. Butter, melted just right, became lemon sweet and golden, drizzled over each fillet with quiet care. Beside it sat small, round potatoes, fresh dug and boiled until they yielded at the touch of a fork. There were no garnishes. No extravagant sides, just flavor pure and simple, earned and appreciated. A plate like this reminded every settler what food could be when it came not from money, but from gratitude. Nothing wasted, everything needed, and more than enough. Sweet yeast dough rolls with caraway seeds and cinnamon butter. Every immigrant kitchen had one scent that made time slow down. The gentle rise of yeast dough near the hearth, soft as breath, warm like memory. And when the occasion called for joy, they turned that dough into sweet, fragrant rolls that tasted like home and victory all at once. Flour, milk, a dash of honey or dark molasses, mixed with care in wooden bowls and left under cloth to rise slowly through the afternoon. Caraway seeds, hand-smuggled from the old country or traded with neighbors, added warmth and that unmistakable old-world aroma, earthy, nutty, grounding. They were baked until golden, their tops glistening with melted butter. But the best part, a spread of cinnamon mixed into softened butter, melting instantly on contact, filling the air with spice and sweetness. These weren't everyday bread. These were Sunday treasures, warm from the fire, shared hand to hand. For birthdays, baptisms, or just the deep relief of surviving another week. In those quiet kitchen moments, a single roll could hold years of hope, oceans crossed, and family held close together by flour, faith, and just enough sugar. So the next time you bite into a good brat, or crunch into kraut, or spoon up something simple and deeply satisfying, know that you're biting into their story, their struggle, their home, and maybe, somewhere deep in you, it still tastes like love.